Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku ate the yomi no mi. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not built equally. This was a truth that Midoriya Izuku learned not at the age of 4, but at the age of 4 years, 3 months, and 12 days. It was a lesson taught not by a doctor's sterile diagnosis, but by the bitter, ash-like taste of a mistake he made on a lonely stretch of Takoba Beach. At 4 years old, the world is a place of vibrant colors and towering giants. Heroes were real, villains were beatable, and every child had a spark waiting to ignite. Izuku was no different. He spent his days vibrating with kinetic energy, waiting for the fire breath of his father or the telekinesis of his mother to manifest. He checked the mirror every morning for glowing eyes or changing skin. On that particular Tuesday, Izuku had wandered away from his mother during a walk along the coastline. Takoba Municipal Beach Park was already beginning its slow descent into a landfill, but there were still patches of pristine sand where the tide brought in treasures from the deep. Izuku was hunting for sea glass. Instead, he found a box. It wasn't a treasure chest. It was a small, waterlogged wooden crate, splintered and rotting, likely tossed overboard from a passing cargo ship or washed away during a storm. The wood crumbled under his small, chubby fingers, revealing a bed of damp straw. Resting in the center was a fruit. It was unlike anything he had seen in the grocery store. It was roughly the size of a melon, but its shape was bulbous and uneven. Its skin was a dull, sorrowful gray, marked with intricate, swirling patterns that seemed to turn in on themselves like eddies in a dark river. It didn't look appetizing. In fact, it looked almost menacing, sitting there against the backdrop of the bright blue ocean. But Izuku was 4, and he was hungry, having skipped his snack time to explore. More importantly, his child logic made a connection that would change the trajectory of his existence. In the comics, he thought, staring at the swirling patterns, special things look weird. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was how quirks happened. Maybe if he ate the weird fruit, he would become like All Might. With trembling hands, he lifted the gray fruit. It felt strangely heavy, dense like a stone wrapped in velvet. He took a bite. The flavor hit him instantly, a wretched, acrid taste that assaulted his tongue like rotting compost mixed with battery acid. It was the taste of something that had been dead for a very long time. Blech! Izuku gagged, tears springing to his eyes. He coughed, dropping the rest of the fruit into the sand. He wanted to spit it out, to scrape the foul residue from his tongue, but he had already swallowed the chunk. It slid down his throat like a lump of cold lead, settling in his stomach with an ominous weight. He waited. He squeezed his eyes shut and clenched his fists, mimicking the pose All Might struck on the television. He waited for power to surge through his veins. He waited for strength. He waited for fire. A minute passed. Then 5. The ocean breeze ruffled his curly green hair. A seagull squawked overhead, mocking him. His stomach gurgled, but that was all. Izuku! His mother's voice cut through the air. Izuku jumped, kicking sand over the remains of the terrible gray fruit to hide his unauthorized snack. He turned and ran back toward the sidewalk, his legs moving no faster than usual, his breath coming in short, normal gasps. He felt nothing. No spark. No heat. No power, just a lingering, bitter aftertaste that no amount of juice could wash away. 2 weeks later, he sat on a crinkling paper sheet in a doctor's office. The air smelled of antiseptic and latex. Dr. Tsubasa, a man with thick goggles and a thick mustache, sat in a swivel chair, looking at an X-ray transparency with a bored expression. Inko Midoriya sat nervously, clutching her purse. So, doctor? Is there something wrong? Most of the other kindergartners have already manifested their quirks. The doctor sighed, the sound heavy with professional indifference. He tapped the X-ray with a pen. You see this here, Mrs. Midoriya? This is his foot. Specifically, the pinky toe. Izuku leaned forward, his All Might action figure clutched tight in his hand. It has 2 joints, the doctor stated bluntly. It's a rare throwback to an older generation. In the age of quirks, the human body has evolved to be more streamlined. Possessing 2 joints in the pinky toe is the primary indicator of a person who has no quirk factor whatsoever. The world seemed to stop. The hum of the air conditioner vanished. The light in the room dimmed. So? Inko's voice trembled. You mean, he's quirkless, the doctor said, turning off the light box. You should probably help him look into other career paths. Police work, perhaps. Or general office administration. Izuku dropped his action figure. It clattered loudly on the linoleum floor. That night, watching the video of All Might's debut for the 10,000th time, Izuku asked his mother the question that would haunt them both. Mom, can I still be a hero? He pointed at the screen with a trembling finger, tears streaming down his face, carving paths through his freckles. He remembered the gray fruit. The bitter taste. The false hope. It had been nothing. Just a piece of garbage from the sea. He was nothing. Inko didn't tell him yes. She didn't tell him he could do it. She hugged him, apologizing over and over again, her tears soaking his shirt. And deep inside Izuku's stomach, in a place biology could not map, a dormant energy slept. It was a seed that required a specific condition to bloom. It required soil, and the soil of the yomi no mi was death. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a place where dreams went to suffocate. The classroom was a cacophony of chatter and low-level quirk usage. Students stretched elastic fingers, floated pencils, or generated small sparks to impress their friends. In the center of it all sat Midoriya Izuku, head bowed over a notebook, trying to make himself as small as physically possible. At 14, Izuku had grown into a lanky, nervous teenager. His uniform was always perfectly pressed, a desperate attempt to look dignified in a world that treated him like a mistake. He scratched notes into his notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your futures. The teacher announced, slapping a stack of papers onto his desk. I would hand out these career aptitude forms, but... He snatched the papers up and threw them into the air with a grin. Why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero course. The class erupted. Quirks flared in a display of teenage bravado. Izuku kept his hand down, shrinking further into his seat. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving the smoke away. But remember, using them in school is against regulations. Hey, teach! A rough, arrogant voice cut through the noise. Bakugo Katsuki leaned back in his chair, feet on the desk, a smirk plastered across his face. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. The class shouted in protest, but Bakugo ignored them. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff for UA High. I'm gonna surpass All Might and become the richest hero of all time. Oh, that's right, the teacher mused, looking at his clipboard. Bakugo, you're aiming for UA, the class murmured in awe. UA was the fortress of heroes, the gold standard, and... The teacher paused, a cruel glint in his eye as he looked toward the back of the room. Midoriya, didn't you put down UA as your first choice too? Silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the vacuum before a thunderclap. Every head in the room turned. Eyes wide, mouths twitching with suppressed laughter. Then, the explosion. Hiya? The class burst into hysterical laughter. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. He's quirkless. He's delusional. Izuku stood up, his face burning. They got rid of that rule. There's no precedent, sure, but... Boom. Bakugo's palms slammed onto Izuku's desk, the explosion blasting him backward onto the floor. The smell of nitroglycerin and burnt wood filled the air. Deku! Bakugo loomed over him, smoke rising from his hands. Forget the crappy quirks of these extras. You're totally quirkless. You're worse than them. You're nothing. And you think you can stand in the same ring as me? No! Wait, Kaken! Izuku scuttled backward against the wall, holding his hands up. I'm not trying to compete with you. It's been my dream since I was little. And I won't know unless I try. Try? Bakugo sneered, his red eyes narrowing. Try what? Taking the entrance exam just to fail? What can you do? You're a punching bag. The rest of the day was a blur of ridicule. By the time the final bell rang, Izuku felt hollowed out. He packed his bag slowly, waiting for the others to leave. He picked up his notebook, his lifeline, his research, his hope. Bakugo snatched it from his hands before he could react. We're not done, Deku. Kaken, give that back. Bakugo looked at the cover. Hero analysis for the future? Seriously? He clapped his hands around the book. An explosion popped. No! Izuku cried out. Bakugo tossed the charred, smoking notebook out the open window. Izuku watched in horror as it plummeted toward the koi pond below. Most top-tier heroes have stories about their school days, Bakugo said, his voice dangerously calm. I want mine to be perfect. The only student from this dump of a school to make it to UA. That's my legacy. So, don't apply, nerd. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Smoke curled from his fingers, searing the fabric of Izuku's uniform. Izuku trembled, unable to speak, unable to move. Bakugo turned to leave with his lackeys. At the door, he stopped. You know, Bakugo said, glancing over his shoulder. If you want to be a hero that badly, there might be a quick way to do it. Izuku looked up, eyes wide. Believe that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, Bakugo said, a cruel grin splitting his face, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Izuku stood there long after they left. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, trembling with a mixture of rage and impotence. If I actually did it, he thought bitterly, that would be assisted suicide. You'd be a villain, Kaken, but he didn't say it. He never said it. He walked down the stairs, went outside, and fished his notebook out of the koi pond. The fish were nibbling at the burned edges. Stupid fish, he muttered, wiping the slime off the cover. That's not food. He walked home, the damp notebook soaking through his pocket. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, orange shadows across the city of Muzurifu. Is it true? He wondered. Is it really impossible? Did that gray fruit curse me to be nothing? He laughed humorlessly at the memory. That stupid fruit. He hadn't thought about it in years. It was just a symbol of his gullibility. A reminder that there were no shortcuts, no magic miracles. He entered the underpass. It was a shortcut to his apartment, a dark tunnel that smelled of mildew and stagnant water. He muttered to himself, trying to psych himself up. Don't let him get to you. Just keep walking forward. Look at me, world. I'm still smiling. He mimicked All Might's laugh, a hollow sound echoing against the concrete walls. Behind him, the manhole cover rattled. Fluid. Thick, viscous, foul-smelling fluid surged up from the sewer. It coalesced into a towering mass of sludge, forming eyes and a gaping, toothless maw. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed, his voice like bubbling tar. Izuku turned around. He didn't have time to scream. The sludge lunged. It slammed into him, a wall of liquid muscle. It forced its way into his mouth, his nose, filling his throat. I can't breathe. Izuku clawed at the liquid, but his fingers passed right through. It was like trying to grab water. Don't struggle, kid, the villain whispered in his ear, or what felt like his ear. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Then it'll all be over. Thanks for the help. You're a real lifesaver. I really didn't know how I was going to hide from him. Izuku's vision began to blur. Black spots danced in his eyes. His lungs burned. The panic was primal, an animalistic terror that overrode every thought in his brain. I'm dying. I'm going to die here. In a sewer tunnel. Nobody knows where I am. Mom. I'm sorry. His strength faded. His arms went limp. The notebook fell from his hand, landing in the muck with a wet splat. Is this it? Is this the end? Clang. The manhole cover flew into the air, spinning like a coin. Have no fear. A voice boomed through the tunnel. A voice that Izuku knew better than his own. A voice that carried the weight of hope itself. Why? The figure stomped onto the pavement, casting a shadow that swallowed the villain whole. Because I am here, All Might, the villain shrieked, lashing out with a tendril of sludge. All Might ducked, weaving effortlessly. Texas. Smash! The punch didn't even connect. The wind pressure alone was like a hurricane. The sludge was blown apart, splattering against the walls and ceiling in a chaotic spray. Izuku was released. He hit the ground hard, gasping, coughing up vile fluid. Air. Sweet, precious air rushed into his lungs. He looked up through tear-filled eyes. A blurry, towering figure stood over him. Hey! Hey! A light tapping on his cheek. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The world came into focus. All Might was looming over him, a blinding smile on his face. Thought I lost you there. Sorry about that. I got a little carried away capturing this guy. Usually I keep things neater, but well, he held up 2 soda bottles filled with the trapped sludge villain. I'm currently on an unplanned break from my duties, you see. Izuku scrambled backward, his mind short-circuiting. All Might. It's really him. He looks so different in person. Wait, I need an autograph. I need a pen. He patted his pockets frantically, then saw his notebook on the ground. He opened it. All Might had already signed it. A massive, sprawling signature across 2 pages. He already did it! Izuku screamed, bowing repeatedly. Thank you? Thank you? It's a family heirloom. I'll treasure it until I die. Okay. All Might gave a thumbs up. Well, I've got to get this guy to the police. Stay out of trouble, kid! He crouched down, muscles tensing to jump. Wait. Already? Izuku stepped forward. But there are so many things I want to ask you. No time. A hero battles not only villains but also time. Wait, Izuku thought. If he leaves now, I'll never know. I'll never get the answer. As All Might launched himself into the sky, Izuku made a decision born of desperation. He grabbed onto All Might's leg. Hey! What are you doing? All Might shouted as they soared over the city. Let go! You fanatic! If I let go now, I'll die! Izuku screamed, his face flapping in the wind. Oh. Good point. They landed on a rooftop a few blocks away. Izuku collapsed, his knees shaking, his heart pounding against his ribs. That was reckless, All Might chastised, though his steam seemed to be increasing. I really have to go now. Wait. Izuku stood up, clutching his chest. I have to know. All Might stopped, even without a quirk. Izuku's voice broke. He stared at the ground. Can I still be a hero? Can someone without power save people like you do? Silence stretched across the rooftop. The wind whistled through the vents. Then, a sound like a deflating tire. Poof! Izuku looked up. All Might was gone. In his place stood a skeletal man with sunken eyes and sharp angles, coughing up blood. Wait! Izuku shrieked. Where's All Might? You're a fake. An imposter. I assure you, I am All Might, the man said, wiping blood from his chin. He sat down heavily. You know how guys at the pool suck in their gut to look buff? It's like that. No way. Izuku whispered. All Might lifted his shirt. Izuku recoiled. A massive, spider-web scar covered the man's entire left side. It looked like the crater of a bomb blast. 5 years ago, All Might said softly. I took a hit that destroyed my respiratory system and removed my stomach. I've wasted away from the repeated surgeries. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day now. 5 years ago? Was that the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? You know your stuff. But no. That punk couldn't scratch me. This was a villain the world doesn't know about. I kept it under wraps. The symbol of peace cannot be seen to be daunted by evil. All Might looked Izuku in the eye. The blue irises were piercing, devoid of the usual performative joy. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much. Pros are always risking their lives, All Might said. I cannot simply say, yes, you can become a hero without a quirk. The words hit Izuku like a physical blow. Harder than Bakugo's explosions. Harder than the sludge villain's grip. If you want to save people, there's always the police force, All Might continued, standing up and walking toward the door to the stairwell. They get a lot of flack because the heroes capture the villains, but it's a fine profession. He opened the door. It's not wrong to dream, young man. But you need to be realistic. The door clicked shut. Izuku was alone on the roof. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. Realistic. Izuku walked to the edge of the roof. He looked down at the street below. The cars looked like toys. The people were ants. Swan dive, Bakugo's voice echoed. Don't be an idiot, Izuku whispered to himself, stepping back from the ledge. That's not who I am. But the fire was gone. The spark he had nurtured for 10 years, shielding it from the rain of mockery and the winds of doubt, had finally been snuffed out. All Might, the god of his world, had spoken. Izuku walked down the stairs. He felt numb. He felt heavy. He wandered aimlessly through the streets of Tatooine's shopping district. He didn't want to go home yet. He couldn't face his mother with this face, the face of a boy who had finally given up. Boom! An explosion rattled the windows of a convenience store. Smoke billowed into the sky a few blocks away. A villain attack? Izuku's instinct was to run toward it, to take notes. He took a step then stopped. Why bother? He thought bitterly. I'm just a quirkless fanda. I should just go home. But his feet moved on their own. Habit was a difficult thing to break. He arrived at the scene. A crowd had gathered, held back by police tape. Fire was everywhere. The heat was intense, stinging the hairs on his arms. It's a monster! Why aren't the heroes doing anything? Izuku peered through the crowd. In the center of an alleyway, surrounded by flames, was the sludge villain. The sludge villain? Izuku's blood ran cold. But All Might caught him. He put him in the bottles. He patted his pocket. It was empty. The jump. When he had grabbed All Might's leg. The bottles must have fallen. This is my fault. The realization was a knife in his gut. I distracted him. I made him drop the villain. And now, I can't get close. Death Arm shouted, shielding his face from the heat. The explosions are too erratic. Where's All Might? Cried Empty Lady. I can't fit in the alley. The heroes were standing around. They were watching. Waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. And in the middle of the sludge, struggling against the suffocation, was a boy. Explosions popped from the boy's palms, wild and desperate. Kaken. Izuku froze. Bakugo was trapped. The sludge was forcing its way down his throat, just like it had done to Izuku. Bakugo's eyes found the crowd. They weren't arrogant. They weren't angry. They were terrified. Help me. The thought didn't even finish forming in Izuku's mind. The police tape snapped. Hey! Kid! Get back! Izuku didn't hear them. He was sprinting. His yellow backpack bounced against his spine. His shoes slapped against the asphalt. He ran into the fire, into the danger, toward the monster that had almost killed him hours ago. Why am I running? Why aren't I stopping? I'm quirkless. I'm useless. You! The sludge villain roared, recognizing him. The brat from the tunnel. Bakugo's eyes widened. Deku? Izuku didn't have a plan. He didn't have a weapon. He just had the desperate need to stop those eyes from looking so scared. Let him go! Izuku screamed. He swung his backpack with all his might. It sailed through the air, the strap catching the villain in his liquid eye. Gah! The villain flinched, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Izuku clawed at the sludge covering Bakugo's mouth. Kaken! Breathe! Why? Bakugo coughed, smoke pouring from his mouth. Why are you here? I don't know. Izuku sobbed, his hands slick with slime. My legs just moved on their own. You looked like you were asking for help. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The heroes were shouting. The fire was roaring. In another timeline, perhaps All Might would have seen this act of bravery. Perhaps he would have been inspired to push past his limits one last time, to dash in and smash the villain apart before harm could befall the boys. But in this timeline, All Might was a second too slow. He had wasted precious moments coughing up blood in an alleyway 3 blocks over, lamenting his weakness. He was rushing toward the scene now, in his skeletal form, desperate to bulk up, but he was still too far away. The sludge villain recovered from the backpack strike. His eye reformed. His anger boiled over. You little pest, the villain growled. You've ruined my escape twice. I'm done playing with you. A tendril of sludge rose up behind Izuku. It wasn't loose or liquid this time. It was compressed, dense as concrete, whipped into a frenzy by the villain's rage. DKU! Behind you! Bakugo screamed. Izuku turned. He saw the mass of darkness. He saw the death coming. He didn't feel fear. Strangely, in that microsecond, he felt acceptance. He had tried. He had finally acted like a hero. "I'm sorry, Mom." Wham! The sound was sickening. It was the sound of a wet sandbag hitting a wall. The tendril struck Izuku square in the chest, shattering ribs, collapsing his sternum, and rupturing his heart. The force launched him backward. He flew through the air, a ragdoll in a school uniform, and crashed onto the pavement 10 feet away. He rolled once and came to a stop. He didn't move. "Izuku!" The scream didn't come from the crowd. It came from the depth of Bakugo's soul. The villain laughed. "One down! Now let's borrow your body, kid." "No!" Bakugo ignited a massive explosion, bigger than any he had ever created, fueled by pure, unadulterated horror. The blast pushed the villain back, giving the heroes a split-second opening, and then the wind changed. "I am here!" All Might arrived. He crashed into the scene like a meteor, eyes glowing with a fury that no camera had ever captured. He didn't smile. There was no trademark grin. Detroit. Smash! The punch vaporized the sludge villain. The air pressure changed the weather instantly. Clouds swirled, and rain began to fall, dousing the fires in the alleyway. The crowd cheered. The villain was scattered across the walls, unconscious. Bakugo sat on the ground coughing, alive, but All Might didn't pose. He didn't wave. He rushed to the boy lying motionless on the wet pavement. "Young man!" All Might knelt down, his massive hands hovering over Izuku's small, broken body. "Open your eyes." "Young man!" Paramedics pushed through the line. "Let us through." Bakugo crawled over, his face pale, ash streaked across his cheeks. "Oh! Deku! Get up! Stop faking it! Get up!" The rain fell harder, mixing with the blood pooling beneath Izuku. A paramedic placed 2 fingers on Izuku's neck. He waited. He adjusted his position. He waited again. He looked up at All Might, shaking his head. "Time of death." 6:42 p.m. Bakugo stared. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The world turned gray. The cheers of the crowd died down as the realization rippled through them. A child was dead. All Might clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. Steam rose from his body, mixing with the rain. He had been too late. The symbol of peace had failed. Darkness. Cold. It wasn't a scary darkness. It was a quiet one. A void where nothing mattered. No bullies. No disappointment. No quirklessness. Izuku floated. He felt light. He felt like he was drifting away on a gentle current, moving toward a distant, pale light that promised rest. "It's over," he thought. "I tried." He drifted further. The light was getting closer. It felt warm, but then a tug. It felt like a fishing hook snagging his collar. A sharp, insistent yank from behind. He looked back into the dark. There was a chain. A golden, ethereal chain attached to his chest. It stretched back into the blackness, down, 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 anchoring him to something he had left behind. And then, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was 4 years old. The taste. That horrible, rotting, ash-like taste filled his mouth again. The darkness began to swirl. It turned gray. It turned into a spiral. A voice echoed in the void. Not All Might's voice. Not his mother's. It was a voice that sounded like the rattling of bones, like the wind through a graveyard, like the deepest, coldest part of the ocean. Yo-ho-ho-ho! The chain pulled tight. Izuku gasped. Musudafu General Hospital, the morgue. 8 p.m. The room was kept at a chilly 4 degrees Celsius. It smelled of formaldehyde and steel. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls. On a gurney in the center of the room lay a body bag, zipped shut. Inside the bag, Midoriya Izuku's body was cold. His skin was pale, tinged with the blue of cyanosis. His heart was a silent lump of muscle in his chest. His ribs were shattered. Biologically, clinically, and legally, he was dead. But the soul is a stubborn thing, especially when it has been modified by the fruit of the underworld. Inside the bag, Izuku's eyes snapped open. He didn't breathe. He didn't need to. He blinked, staring at the darkness of the vinyl bag. Huh! His voice didn't vibrate in his throat. It echoed directly from his soul. He tried to sit up. His head passed straight through the zipper of the bag. Izuku looked down. He saw the black bag. He saw the zipper. And then he realized his head was outside the bag while his body was inside. He scrambled backward, flailing. His entire body phased through the vinyl material and the steel table, causing him to float in the air for a second before gravity, or at least, the habit of gravity, asserted itself. He hit the floor, but it didn't hurt. He stood up, looking at his hands. They were translucent, pale green and ghostly. He could see the floor tiles through his palms. "I'm a ghost!" he screamed, grabbing his face. "I'm dead! I actually died. Kaken was right. I'm a ghost." He looked at the table. He saw the bag. "Wait, that's me." He floated closer. He reached out a ghostly hand and unzipped the bag. There he was. Pale. Broken. Bloody uniform. Oh God. I looked terrible. He hovered over his own corpse, panic setting in. What do I do? What happens now? Do I go to heaven? Hell? The waiting room from Beetlejuice? He felt the tug again. That golden chain in his chest? It seemed to be pulling him toward the body. It wants me to go back? He hesitated. The body looked painful. It looked broken, but it was his. I can't leave Mom alone, he whispered. She'll be devastated. With a deep breath, which he didn't actually take, Izuku dove, he slammed into his own chest. Thump. The sensation was like being doused in ice water. Heavy. Solid. Izuku gasped, a physical gasp this time, as his soul re-inhabited his cells. Pain flared in his chest, sharp and agonizing, but distant, as if his nerves were dampened by a layer of frost. He sat up. The zipper of the body bag snagged on his nose. Ow, he muttered. His voice was raspy, dry as a tomb. He pushed the bag open and swung his legs over the side of the metal table. He looked at his hands. They were solid again. Pale, yes. Cold as ice, yes. But solid. He put a hand to his chest. Nothing. No heartbeat. He put a finger to his neck. Nothing. He held his breath. He didn't feel the urge to exhale. Izuku stared at the wall. I'm dead. But I'm moving. The door to the morgue swung open. A nurse walked in, holding a clipboard, looking tired. Dr. Ejiko needs the file on the stabbing victim in drawer 4. She looked up. She saw the body bag unzipped. She saw the boy with the green hair, the boy who had been pronounced dead 2 hours ago, sitting on the table, swinging his legs. Izuku looked at her. He offered a tentative, apologetic wave. Excuse me? Do you have any milk? My bones feel a little broken. The nurse dropped the clipboard. Her eyes rolled back into her head. She fainted, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Izuku winced. Probably shouldn't have done that. He hopped off the table. His shattered ribs ground together, a sickening sound, but the pain was manageable. It was just information. Damage located. He walked over to a metal reflective surface on the wall. He looked at himself. He looked mostly the same, though paler. His eyes seemed to have a faint, green luminescence to them in the dim light. He thought back to the fruit. The gray, swirling fruit from 10 years ago. The doctor said I was quirkless, Izuku whispered. He clenched his cold fist. A chill mist radiated from his hand, freezing the condensation on the metal cabinet. He was right, Izuku realized, a strange, hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. I was quirkless. Until I died. He looked at his hand, then at the fainted nurse, and finally at the ceiling, toward the world of the living above. I'm not a hero, he whispered. I'm a ghost story. The waiting room of Nizurifu General Hospital was a space designed to manage anxiety, painted in calming pastels and filled with the low, rhythmic hum of vending machines. But tonight, it felt like a vacuum. The air was thin, unable to carry enough oxygen to the lungs of the people sitting there. Inko Midoriya sat on a plastic orange chair, her body folded in on itself like a collapsed star. She wasn't crying anymore. She had passed the point of tears an hour ago, entering a catatonic state where the mind simply refuses to process the reality presented to it. Beside her, a police detective, Naomasa Tsukachi, sat with his hat in his hands. He looked exhausted. He had delivered bad news before, but never to a mother whose son had died trying to be a hero with nothing but a backpack and a prayer. Mrs. Midoriya, Sakachi said gently, his voice barely a whisper. I know there are no words. But we need to process some paperwork regarding the body. Inko didn't move. She stared at a scuff mark on the linoleum floor. He forgot his lunch, she whispered. Sakachi blinked. I'm sorry? This morning, Inko said, her voice cracking like dry glass. He was in such a rush. He forgot his bento. I was going to make katsudon tonight. To make up for it. Across the room, leaning against the wall near the vending machines, stood Bakugo Katsuki. He was still in his school uniform, though it was stained with soot and smelled of burnt caramel and sewage. He hadn't gone home. He couldn't. His parents had called, screaming and crying with relief that he was alive, but he had hung up on them. He stared at his hands. Pop pop. Small, involuntary sparks danced across his palms. He clenched his fists to smother them. Take a swan dive off the roof. The words echoed in his skull, louder than the explosions, louder than the sirens. I killed him, Bakugo thought. The realization was a cold iron spike driven through his chest. The villain killed him, sure. But I weakened him. I broke him down. I told him to die, and then, when it mattered, when the slime villain had suffocated him, it was the useless, quirkless Deku who had run in. Not the pros. Not the police. Deku. And now Deku was in a bag in the basement, and Bakugo was standing here, breathing. It should have been me, Bakugo muttered, the words tasting like ash. The automatic doors slid open. A skeletal figure in an oversized yellow suit stood in the shadows of the entrance, watching. All Might gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. He saw the mother. He saw the boy's friend. He felt the weight of his own failure crushing his non-existent stomach. He turned away, unable to face them. He had saved the city, but he had lost the soul of the city. The basement, the morgue. Excuse me? Ms. Nurse? Izuku poked the unconscious woman's cheek with a pale, cold finger. She didn't stir. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Izuku retracted his hand, running it through his hair. I've committed a crime. Assaulting medical personnel? Is that a crime if you're dead? Is it haunting? He looked around the morgue. It was a terrifying room, honestly. Stainless steel everywhere, the hum of refrigeration units, the smell of heavy cleaning agents that failed to mask the underlying scent of decay. He looked down at his chest. The fabric of his Gakurin uniform was torn open, revealing the skin beneath. It was a mess. A massive, purple-black bruise covered his entire torso. His ribs looked uneven. He pressed a hand against his sternum. Crack. Ow, he said flatly. It was strange. He knew it should hurt. The signals were being sent to his brain. Warning, structural damage. Warning, tissue trauma. But the urgency was gone. It was like reading a notification on a phone rather than feeling a knife in the gut. The pain was information, not sensation. He took a step forward and stumbled. His legs felt heavy, like he was wading through water. Okay. Legs work. Mostly. He walked back to the metal table where the nurse lay. He couldn't just leave her there. The floor was cold. I should lift her? Izuku grabbed the nurse under the arms. He braced himself, expecting to struggle. He was, after all, a skinny teenager with no muscle mass who had supposedly died of blunt force trauma. He lifted her, as if she weighed nothing. Huh! Izuku blinked. He held the adult woman in the air effortlessly. He didn't feel his muscles strain. He didn't feel the burn of lactic acid. It was as if his body had forgotten that gravity was a law it had to obey. He placed her gently on a swivel chair. Okay. She's safe. Now, what am I? Izuku walked over to the counter where a stainless steel tray held surgical instruments. He picked up a scalpel. He looked at his forearm. He hesitated. This is crazy. Don't do this. But he had to know. He pressed the blade against his skin. He pushed. The skin parted. There was no sting. No sharp intake of breath. And there was no blood. The wound was dry. Inside, the tissue was gray and still. No crimson flow. No pulse. Just meat. I really don't have a pulse, Izuku whispered. He dropped the scalpel. My heart isn't beating. My blood isn't moving. By all laws of biology, my brain should be oxygen-starved and dead within minutes. He touched his face. But I'm thinking. I'm talking. I'm me. Suddenly, the heavy double doors swung open again. Nurse Arai? Did you find the file for? Two men in scrubs walked in. One was young and intern. The other was older, bald, with thick glasses and a bushy gray mustache. Dr. Kudaigaraki, posing as Dr. Tsubasa from the local clinic, working a shift at the hospital as a specialist. They stopped. They looked at the empty body bag on the table. They looked at Nurse Arai passed out in the chair. They looked at the boy standing by the counter, holding a scalpel, with his chest caved in and his skin pale as moonlight. Izuku froze. He slowly placed the scalpel on the tray. I can explain, Izuku squeaked. The intern screamed. It was a high-pitched, horror movie scream that echoed off the tile walls. Zombie! Dr. Garaki, however, didn't scream. His goggles glinted in the harsh light. He stepped forward, fascination overriding fear. Fascinating. The subject in morgue drawer 4. Midoriya Izuku, pronounced dead at 6:42 p.m. Cause of death, cardiac rupture and massive internal hemorrhaging. Yes, that's me, Izuku said, raising a hand. Hi. Dr. Tsubasa? You were my pediatrician. The intern was hyperventilating against the doorframe. Sir. We need security. We need a hero. It's a villain quirk. Necromancy. Quiet, idiot, Garaki snapped. He walked right up to Izuku. He didn't look scared. He looked like a kid in a candy store. He grabbed Izuku's wrist. Cold, Garaki muttered. Room temperature. No radial pulse. He placed a hand on Izuku's neck. No carotid pulse. He pulled a penlight from his pocket and shone it in Izuku's eyes. Pupils are fixed and dilated. Wait. No. They're reactive. But the color, there is a luminescence. Doctor, you're really close, Izuku murmured, leaning back. It's a little uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Garaki laughed, a wheezing manic sound. Boy, you are a medical impossibility. You are a corpse that is holding a conversation. Do you feel pain? A little? My ribs feel crunchy. Crunchy, Garaki repeated, jotting something down on a notepad he produced from nowhere. Respiratory function? I don't think I'm breathing, Izuku admitted. I mean, I can talk, so air is moving over my vocal cords, but I don't feel the need to breathe. Like I can just stop. He stopped. He stood there for 20 seconds, staring at the doctor. See? The intern looked like he was about to throw up. This is unholy. This is a quirk, Garaki declared, his eyes gleaming. A dormant, reactionary biological mutation. It must be. We diagnosed you as quirkless because of the toe joint, but perhaps the quirk factor was hidden deep within the somatic stem cells, triggered only by the cessation of vital functions. Garaki grabbed Izuku's shoulders. Boy, do you have any idea how rare resurrection quirks are? Usually, they just restart the heart. But you are functioning without the heart. You've bypassed the biological engine entirely. Can I see my mom? Izuku asked, his voice trembling slightly. She must be worried. Garaki paused. He looked at the boy's pleading eyes. For a moment, the mad scientist persona faded, replaced by the mask of the kindly neighborhood doctor. Yes, Garaki said. Yes, of course. But first, we need to get you upstairs. We can't have a reunion in the morgue. It's unsanitary. He turned to the terrified intern. Get a gurney. And call the cardiac ward. Tell them we have a code. Actually, I don't think there is a code for this. Just tell them the dead boy is walking. The hallway 3rd floor. The transition from the basement to the ward was chaotic. Izuku was made to lie down on a gurney, for appearances, Garaki insisted, covered with a sheet up to his neck. As they wheeled him through the corridors, nurses gasped and doctors stopped their conversations. The rumor mill moved faster than light. The zombie boy. The miracle of Muzurifu. They wheeled him into a private room. Garaki began hooking him up to machines. The EKG machine flatlined. Breep. Turn that off, Garaki barked. It's annoying. The pulse oximeter read error. The blood pressure cuff inflated, then deflated, giving a reading of 0/0. Okay, Izuku said, sitting up on the bed. This is really validating my I'm dead theory. You are clinically dead, Garaki agreed, reading a chart. But metabolically, something else is happening. Your cells aren't decaying. In fact, the cellular degradation that should have occurred in the 2 hours you were down has reversed. Whatever energy is powering you, it's preserving the meat. The meat, Izuku grimaced. Please don't call me meat. I need to run a CT scan. I need a blood sample, if I can scrape some up. But first. Garaki looked at the door. Detective Sakachi is bringing your mother. Izuku's breath, or the air simulation of it, hitched. Mom, prepare yourself, Midoriya, Garaki warned. She thinks you are a corpse. This is going to be dramatic. The reunion. The door opened slowly. Sakachi walked in first, looking grave. He held the door open for Inko. She looked small. So incredibly small. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy. She was trembling so hard she could barely walk. Mrs. Midoriya, Sakachi said softly. The doctor said, there's been a development. He wanted you to see him before we proceed. Inko stepped into the room. She saw the bed. She saw the boy sitting upright, swinging his legs, looking at her with wide green eyes. The world stopped spinning. Inko dropped her purse. Her mouth opened, a silent scream of disbelief forming on her lips. Hi, Mom, Izuku said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry I forgot my lunch. Inko didn't scream. She didn't faint. She exploded. Izuku. It was a wail of such pure, undiluted emotion that it rattled the windows. She sprinted, actually sprinted, across the room and slammed into him. Mom! My ribs! She didn't care about his ribs. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. Her quirk, attraction of small objects, went haywire. Every pen, clipboard, and loose medical instrument in the room went flying toward them, clattering against the bed and the floor. You're alive! You're alive! Oh my God, my baby! My baby! She was flooding him with tears. Literally. Izuku felt like he was drowning. Mom, I'm okay. I'm okay. Izuku patted her back, crying his own ghost tears, which were strangely cold. But then Inko froze. She pulled back slightly, her hands resting on his cheeks. Izuku, she whispered, her eyes widening. You're freezing. She pressed her ear to his chest. Silence. She looked at the EKG machine, which was turned off. She looked at Dr. Garaki, who was observing with clinical detachment. Doctor? Inko's voice trembled. Why is he so cold? Why can't I hear his heart? Izuku took her hands. Mom. Listen to me. I think I have a quirk. Inko stared at him. A quirk? It must be like a resurrection quirk, Izuku lied, sort of. He couldn't tell her about the fruit. Not yet. It sounded too crazy, even for this. I died, Mom. I really did. But then. I came back. But my body didn't restart all the way. Inko looked at him with horror and confusion. But you're talking. You're moving. I know. It's weird. I don't need to breathe. And I don't feel pain the same way. Izuku tried to smile, but it looked a bit strained. But I'm here. I'm me. I promise. Inko looked at him for a long, agonizing moment. Then, the tears started again. I don't care, she sobbed, pulling him back into a hug. I don't care if you're a ghost. I don't care if you're a zombie. You're my son. You're here. Izuku closed his eyes, leaning into her warmth. Even though he couldn't feel the heat transferring to his skin, he felt the love. It was the only thing anchoring him to the world of the living. Bang! The door slammed open. DKU! Bakugo Katsuki stood in the doorway. He was panting, sweat dripping down his face. He had run past the nurses, past the security. He saw Inko hugging Izuku. He saw Izuku sitting up. Bakugo's face went through a kaleidoscope of expressions: shock, disbelief, relief, and then, finally, settling on a furious, terrified rage. You! Bakugo stepped forward, his voice shaking. You dead bastard. Language, Katsuki! Inko scolded instinctively, though she didn't let go of Izuku. He was dead. Bakugo shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Izuku. I saw him. I saw the life go out of his eyes. He was meat on the pavement. I got better? Izuku offered weakly. Don't give me that. Bakugo marched up to the bed. He looked like he wanted to grab Izuku by the collar, but he stopped inches away. He could sense it too. The lack of heat radiating from the boy, the stillness. What the hell are you? Bakugo whispered. Are you a ghost? Did you haunt your own body? It's my quirk, Kaken, Izuku said, finding a strange new confidence. Maybe it was the fact that he had already died, so an angry Bakugo wasn't as scary anymore. It just took a while to kick in. A quirk? Bakugo stepped back, looking revolted. So you were lying? All this time? You had a quirk? I didn't know. Izuku protested. It's a reactive quirk. It only works if I die. Bakugo stared at him. The implication hit him. If he had a quirk that only works if he dies, and I told him to kill himself. Bakugo's face paled. He looked like he was going to be sick, so. Bakugo's voice was barely audible. You're a zombie. Undead American, please, Izuku joked. Nobody laughed. Look at his chest, Dr. Garaki interrupted, pointing a pen. His ribs are still crushed. His sternum is fractured. He should be screaming in agony. But his nervous system has been dampened. Bakugo looked at the bruise peeking out from the hospital gown. It was horrific. Does it hurt? Bakugo asked, his voice rough. Not really, Izuku said. It feels cold. Like ice. Bakugo clenched his fists. You reckless idiot. Running in there without a quirk. You died. You actually died. I moved without thinking, Izuku said softly. Just like you always said. I'm a nerd who doesn't know his place. Shut up, Bakugo snapped, but there was no heat in it. He turned away, hiding his face. Just shut up. Don't die again, you damn nerd. Or I'll kill you myself. That seems counterproductive, Izuku noted. Later that night, 11 p.m., the hospital room was quiet. Inko had finally fallen asleep in the chair next to the bed, clutching Izuku's hand. Bakugo had been dragged away by his parents an hour ago. Izuku lay awake. Sleep, he discovered, was another thing he didn't really need, though his mind felt tired. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about the fruit. The yomi no mi. He remembered the feeling of the void. The golden chain. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake his mother. He looked at his hand. If I'm dead, he whispered, what else can I do? He concentrated. He focused on that deep, cold sensation in the pit of his stomach. The source of his reanimation. Chill. He imagined the chill flowing down his arm. Slowly, imperceptibly, the air around his hand began to mist. Frost formed on his fingertips. It wasn't ice like Todoroki's quirk, sharp and physical. It was a spectral frost. A cold that burned. The chill of the underworld. Izuku flexed his fingers. The frost vanished. I need to train, he thought. I have 10 months before the UA entrance exam. He looked at his broken body. Dr. Garaki said my cells aren't regenerating normally. Natural healing relies on blood flow and metabolism. I don't have those. He needed something else. He remembered a random fact from a biology textbook, mixed with a strange instinct that bubbled up from the fruit's memory. Calcium. Bones. I need milk, Izuku whispered. He looked at the bedside table. There was a small carton of milk from the hospital dinner he hadn't eaten. He grabbed it. He stabbed the straw in. He drank it in one go. The sensation was immediate. He felt the calcium rush through his system, not through digestion, but absorbed directly into his essence. Click. Snap. Izuku gasped. His chest moved. A rib that was pressing against his lung, which he didn't use, but still, snapped back into place. The bruise on his skin lightened by a shade. Whoa, Izuku breathed. Okay. Milk is good. He looked out the window at the city lights of Mizurifu. All Might. He remembered the rooftop. Can I be a hero without a quirk? I still don't have a quirk, Izuku whispered to the reflection in the glass. Not really. I'm just a ghost haunting a corpse. He clenched his fist. watching the green spectral energy flicker around his knuckles. But a ghost can still punch a villain. A ghost can still save people. He looked at his mother's sleeping face. I died today, Izuku Midoriya declared to the silent room. Midoriya Izuku, the quirkless boy, died on that pavement. He stood up, walking to the window. His reflection showed a boy with wild green hair, pale skin, and eyes that glowed with an eerie, determined light. But Deku. He smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't a nervous, trembling smile. It was a grin that showed a few too many teeth. A grin that mocked the Reaper. Deku is just getting started. The rooftop across the street, high above the streetlights, a figure watched the window of room 304. All Might stood in the rain. He had been there for hours. He had seen the commotion. He had heard the rumors from the nurses on their smoke breaks. The boy lived. A resurrection quirk. Toshinori Yagi let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The guilt that had been eating at his soul for the last 5 hours loosened its grip slightly. He's alive. All Might looked at his hand. He had been considering it. Passing one for all to the boy. The boy had shown the heart of a hero. He had moved when others stood still. But now, he has a quirk, All Might whispered. A powerful one. One that brought him back from the grave. All Might lowered his hand. He doesn't need my power. He has his own path now. And, All Might shivered. Even from this distance, he felt a strange aura radiating from that hospital room. It wasn't evil, but it wasn't natural. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of a graveyard at midnight. That boy has touched the other side, All Might murmured. If I burden him with one for all, with the ghosts of the past users, it might be too much for a soul that already walks between worlds. He turned away. Live well, young Midoriya. You are a miracle. I will watch your career with great interest. All Might leaped into the night, vanishing into the storm. He left Izuku alone. He left him without the guided path of the symbol of peace. And in doing so, he forced Izuku to forge a new path. Not as the next All Might, but as the first king of the underworld. The transition from living boy to ambulatory corpse was less dramatic than the movies made it seem, but infinitely more inconvenient. It had been 3 days since Izuku Midoriya had died and subsequently walked out of the hospital. The medical community of Mizudafu was still in a quiet uproar, with Dr. Garaki, the disguised doctor, publishing a paper on post-mortem quirk activation and metabolic stasis, carefully omitting the parts that defied all known physics to keep his true master's interest hidden. For Izuku, however, the problem wasn't scientific. It was domestic. Izuku, honey, you haven't blinked in 4 minutes. Izuku snapped out of his trance, looking across the breakfast table at his mother. Inko looked as though she hadn't slept in a week. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she jumped every time he moved too quickly. Ah. Sorry, Mom, Izuku said, forcing his eyelids to close and open. It's a bad habit. My eyes don't dry out anymore, so the reflex is gone. He looked down at his breakfast, grilled fish, miso soup, and rice. The smell was there, savory, salty, comforting, but it felt distant. Like smelling a meal from the room next door. He picked up his chopsticks and took a bite of the fish. He chewed. He swallowed. There was no warmth spreading through his stomach. The food simply fell into the void of his interior, where his dormant metabolism would eventually break it down into raw energy. Is it good? Inko asked, wringing her hands. It's delicious, Mom, Izuku lied. In truth, everything tasted muted. The only thing that registered with any intensity was the milk. He reached for the tall glass of cow's milk sitting next to the soup. He downed it in one long gulp. As the white liquid hit his system, a sensation of genuine relief washed over him. It was like oiling a rusty hinge. The microfractures in his shins from walking home yesterday knit themselves together with a faint, audible click. More milk? Inko asked, already reaching for the carton. She had bought 12 gallons. The fridge was nothing but milk. I'm okay for now, Izuku said, standing up. I need to figure this out. My body. He looked at his hands. They were pale. Not the creamy pale of someone who stayed indoors, but the alabaster, bloodless pale of marble. If he held them up to the light, they didn't glow pink. They remained grayish-green. I'm going to take a bath, Izuku announced. I feel stiff. Rigor mortis comes and goes, I think. Don't make jokes like that. Inko squeaked. Sorry. Coping mechanism. Izuku grabbed a towel and headed for the bathroom. He needed privacy. He needed to strip away the uniform, the bandages, and the expectations, and see exactly what he was working with. The bathroom was steamy. Inko had drawn the bath earlier, trying to make the house feel normal. Izuku undressed. He looked at himself in the mirror. The bruising from the sludge villain's attack had faded from purple to a dull, sickly yellow, but the shape of the impact was still visible on his chest. His ribs were healed, thanks to the gallons of milk, but his skin looked tight, stretched over his bones. He was skinny. Too skinny. Without blood pumping to his muscles, he looked less like a hero in training and more like a famine victim. I can't go to UA looking like a skeleton, he muttered. I need to build muscle. Can I even build muscle? Do dead cells undergo hypertrophy? He sighed, opening his notebook, a new one, Hero Analysis for the Future number 14, and jotting down the question. Hypothesis. Muscle fibers tear and repair to grow. If I tear them, and use calcium/nutrients to repair them, will they grow back denser? Or just the same size? He put the notebook down and stepped toward the tub. The water was hot. Steam curled off the surface. Okay. A nice, hot soak. Maybe it'll warm up my core. He stepped in. Left foot. Right foot. He sat down. The water rose to his chest, and then, the world ended. It wasn't pain. It was a sudden, absolute negation of strength. It felt as though gravity had suddenly increased 1,000 times over. His energy, his will, his ability to send signals to his limbs, it all vanished instantly. Splash. Izuku slumped forward. His face hit the water. He slid down to the bottom of the tub. I can't move. His eyes were open underwater, staring at the porcelain bottom of the tub. His arms floated uselessly at his sides. He tried to push himself up. He tried to twitch a finger. Nothing. It was as if his body had turned to stone. The fruit, his mind screamed. The curse of the sea. He had read about it in old legends, obscure forums about devil fruits. The user becomes a hammer in the water. He had forgotten. He had been so focused on the resurrection part that he forgot the cost. He lay there on the bottom of the tub. Usually, this would be the part where he drowned. The panic would set in, the lungs would burn, and he would die. But Izuku was already dead. He lay there, water filling his mouth, his nose, his throat. I'm not drowning, he realized with a detached horror. I don't need oxygen. He just lay there, staring at the drain. Unable to blink. Unable to move. Minutes passed. The water began to cool. This is pathetic, Izuku thought. I'm going to spend eternity at the bottom of a bathtub because I wanted to get clean. He tried to scream for his mother. All that came out were bubbles. Blub. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. Izuku? You've been quiet for a while. Is everything okay? Silence. Izuku? Inko peered into the bathroom. She saw the water. She saw the dark shape at the bottom of the tub. Izuku, I am never taking a bath again. Izuku sat on the living room floor, wrapped in 3 towels, shivering. Not from cold. He was always cold, but from the lingering sensation of absolute helplessness. Inko was hyperventilating into a paper bag nearby. She had used her quirk to pull him out of the water, drenching the entire hallway in the process. I thought you drowned, she wailed. I thought you died again. I can't drown, Mom, Izuku explained, wringing out his hair. But I can't move in water. It saps my energy. It must be the side effect of my quirk. No baths, Inko declared firmly. Showers only. With a stool. And a safety rail. And I'm leaving the door unlocked. Deal. Izuku stared at his hands. The paralysis had been terrifying. It was a weakness. A massive, glaring weakness. If a villain figured this out, if a villain had a water quirk, he was finished. He wouldn't just be beaten, he would be a statue. I need to be stronger, he thought. I need to be so strong that I never end up in that position. I need to be faster than the water. He looked at the calendar on the wall. The UA entrance exam was 10 months away. 10 months. He stood up. The towels fell away. "Mom," he said, his voice steady. "I'm going out." "Out? Where?" "It's almost dark." "To the beach," Izuku said. "I have work to do." Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the mountains of trash. The beach was a graveyard of appliances, tires, and forgotten dreams. It smelled of rust and rot. Izuku stood at the edge of the sand, wearing a green tracksuit. He looked at the expanse of garbage. This was where he had found the fruit 10 years ago. It felt fitting that this was where he would forge his new self. All Might isn't coming, Izuku whispered to himself. He had waited, foolishly, for a day or two. Hoping the hero would seek him out. Hoping that surviving death would prove his worthiness. But the phone hadn't rung. No skeletal man had appeared around the corner. He said I should be a police officer, Izuku reminded himself. He gave up on me. He stepped onto the sand. But I haven't given up on me. He walked up to a rusted refrigerator. It was massive, an industrial model half buried in the sand. It probably weighed close to 250 kilograms. Okay. Let's see what a zombie can do. Izuku gripped the bottom of the fridge. He planted his feet. Heave. He pulled. Nothing happened. The fridge didn't budge. Izuku strained. He gritted his teeth. He pulled until his vision swam, metaphorically. It's too heavy. He let go, panting. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. I'm weak, he spat. I'm just a quirkless kid who happens to be immortal. That's not enough. Immortal weaklings are just punching bags that last forever. He kicked the fridge in frustration. Thud. He thought about the anatomy books he had read. He thought about Dr. Garaki's words. You've bypassed the biological engine. Why can't I lift it? He asked the air. Muscles are just pulleys. Bones are levers. The brain limits the force to prevent injury. He looked at the fridge. But I don't care about injury. He approached the fridge again. Turn it off, he commanded his brain. Turn off the safety switches. Turn off the fear of pain. He grabbed the metal. The rust dug into his palms. Pull. He didn't just pull. He ripped. He engaged every muscle fiber in his back, his legs, his arms. He pulled with a violence that a living body would scream at. Snap. A sickening sound echoed across the beach. Izuku's right humerus fractured under the tension of his own tricep. The muscle fibers in his shoulder tore like wet paper. But he didn't stop. He didn't scream. He didn't flinch. He just registered the damage. Right arm structural integrity compromised. And shifted the weight. Up. With a guttural roar that sounded more like a growl from the grave, Izuku heaved the fridge into the air. It tore free from the sand. He held it, balancing the massive weight on his chest and his broken arm. He walked. 1 step. 2 steps. His legs shook. His knee ligaments popped. He walked 10 meters and threw the fridge onto a pile of tires. Crash. Izuku stood there, swaying. His right arm hung at a grotesque angle. His left knee was bent backwards slightly. I did it, he whispered. He looked at his broken arm. Okay. That's inconvenient. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a thermos. Milk. High-fat, calcium-enriched whole milk. He chugged the entire liter. He waited. He focused on the break. He focused on the soul energy that kept his form together. Heel. Crack snap. His arm twisted on its own. The bone realigned with a sound like a gunshot. The torn muscle fibers wove themselves back together. Izuku rolled his shoulder. It was stiff, but functional. A wild grin spread across his face. It wasn't All Might's smile. It was something sharper. I can break myself, Izuku realized. I can break myself over and over again. And as long as I have milk, I can keep going. He looked at the mountain of trash. Let's get to work. Month 3, the grind. The rumors started in the 2nd month. People avoided Dagoba Beach at night. They said there was a cryptid. A ghost. Fishermen reported hearing strange sounds, heavy machinery being moved, metal screeching, but seeing no trucks. Just a green will-o'-the-wisp moving in the darkness. Izuku didn't care about the rumors. He cared about the pile. He had cleared a quarter of the beach. His body was changing. He wasn't bulking up like a bodybuilder. The dead flesh didn't retain water or swell with inflammation like living tissue. Instead, he was becoming dense. His muscles were like steel cables, wound tight under his pale skin. He had adopted a new routine. School, where he was ignored. Bakugo had stopped bullying him, treating him with a wary, terrified distance. Homework, beach, break bones, drink milk, repeat until sunrise. He didn't sleep much. Maybe 2 hours of meditative stasis a night. But tonight something was different. He was dragging a rusted truck chassis. It was raining. The water made the sand slick. He slipped. The chassis slid back, pinning his leg against the concrete block. Crunch. Ankle pulverized, Izuku noted calmly. Tibia fractured. He tried to push the truck off. It was stuck in the mud. He was trapped. He pushed. He strained. But the leverage was wrong. Move, he hissed. The rain was cold. The wind was howling. For the first time in months, Izuku felt frustration bubbling up. Not just annoyance, but a deep, cold rage. Why is everything so hard? Why do I have to be a corpse to be strong? Why did All Might leave me? The emotions swirled in his gut, mixing with the devil fruit energy. Move! He slammed his fist against the metal of the truck, and then the temperature dropped. It wasn't the rain. From Izuku's fist, a wave of darkness, no, a wave of absence, rippled out. It washed over the truck chassis. Crack, hiss. The rain hitting the truck turned to ice instantly. But it wasn't normal ice. It was green-tinted, dark, and jagged. The metal of the truck groaned as it became brittle, frozen to absolute zero in a split second. Izuku stared. He touched the frozen metal. It crumbled under his fingers like dry clay. The entire side of the truck disintegrated into frozen dust. Izuku pulled his leg free. It was mangled, but he ignored it. He stared at his hand. Mist was rising from his skin. Green, spectral mist. It's cold, he whispered. He closed his eyes and looked inward. He saw his soul. It wasn't a warm flame. It was a cold green sun. The yomi no mi, he muttered. It controls the soul. And the soul is the cold of the underworld. He concentrated. He tried to draw that cold out again. He channeled the feeling of the morgue. The feeling of the body bag. The feeling of the void. Soul solid. Frost coated his arm. It thickened, forming a gauntlet of spectral ice. He punched a tire. The tire didn't bounce. It shattered like glass. Izuku looked at the frozen shards. I have a weapon. Month 6, the Phantom. Izuku stood atop a pile of trash, panting. He held a bow staff made from a piece of pipe he had salvaged. He wasn't alone. 3 thugs stood at the base of the trash heap. They were local lowlifes, looking for copper wire to steal. They had stumbled upon the ghost of Dagoba. Hey, kid! One of them shouted. He had a quirk that made his hands turn into drills. Get lost! This is our turf tonight. Izuku looked down at them. His eyes glowed in the darkness. Leave, Izuku said. His voice had changed over the months. It was deeper, hollower. It carried a reverberation that unsettled the stomach. You think you're tough? The drill thug revved his hands. Get him, boys. They charged up the trash heap. Izuku didn't panic. He felt bored. 3 targets. Moving slow. Living bodies. So fragile. He leaped down. He didn't land like a hero. He landed like a spider, limbs splayed, absorbing the impact with unnatural flexibility. Boo, he whispered. He moved. He dodged a punch from Thug A. He didn't block. He just swayed his body out of the way, his spine bending at an impossible angle. He grabbed Thug A's wrist. Chill. He channeled a fraction of his soul energy. Aya! It burns! The thug screamed, dropping to his knees. His arm wasn't frozen solid, but the nerves were shocked with the sensation of death. The drill thug lunged. Die, freak! He thrust his drill at Izuku's chest. Izuku didn't dodge. He took the hit. Zzzzzt. The drill tore through Izuku's tracksuit. It tore through his skin. It ground against his ribs. Izuku didn't blink. He looked at the drill in his chest, then up at the horrified thug. Is that it? Izuku asked. He grabbed the drill with his bare hand. His grip was hysterical strength, bone-crushing, steel-bending power. Crunch. He crushed the spinning drill mechanism. The thug shrieked. Izuku headbutted him. Thwack. The thug went down, unconscious. The third thug looked at Izuku, bloodless wound in his chest, glowing eyes, frost creeping up his neck. And monster, he ran. Izuku sighed. He reached into his bag, pulled out a carton of milk, and took a sip. As he drank, the hole in his chest knit itself closed. The skin sealed over, leaving a faint, pale scar to join the collection of others. I need to work on my dodging, he critiqued himself. I rely too much on being unkillable. It's a bad habit. He looked at the unconscious thugs. I should probably call the police. Or leave them tied up with frozen rebar? Yeah, rebar seems good. Month 9, the soul projection. Okay. Let's try this again. Izuku sat in the lotus position on the cleanest patch of sand. The beach was 90% clear. The ocean view was beautiful. He closed his eyes. He had discovered the ice. He had discovered the strength. Now, he was trying to master the final aspect of the fruit he had sensed in the void. Separation. He focused on the tether. The chain that held him to his body. Let go. He pushed. It felt like trying to squeeze out of a tight wetsuit. Pop. Suddenly, Izuku was looking down at himself. His body sat on the sand, slumped over, mouth slightly open. And he, the real him, was floating 10 feet in the air. He was a green, translucent spirit. He had no legs, just a wispy tail like a genie. I did it! His spirit voice was echoey and weird. He flew around. He passed through a lamppost. He flew through a seagull. The bird squawked and fell out of the sky, shivering. This is amazing. I can scout. I can fly. I can walk through walls. He looked back at his body. But my body is defenseless. He swooped down. He tried to pick up a soda can with his spirit hand. His hand passed right through it. Can't touch physical objects. That's a limitation. He concentrated. Soul solid. He coated his spirit hand in the ice energy. He touched the can again. This time, the ice interacted with the matter. He flicked the can. It flew across the beach. Okay. So I can interact if I use energy. But it drains me. He felt a tug. A weariness. He dove back into his body. Gasp. He woke up in his physical form, gasping for air he didn't need. 5 minutes, he noted. 5-minute limit before I get exhausted. I need to extend that. Month 10, the day of the exam. The sun rose over the horizon. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was pristine. The trash was gone. Every scrap of metal, every tire, every piece of plastic. The sand was raked clean. The water sparkled. Standing in the center of the beach, atop a small seawall, was Midoriya Izuku. He was unrecognizable from the boy of 10 months ago. He wore a black tank top and cargo pants. His skin was pale, almost white. His hair was a wild green halo. His arms were corded with dense, wiry muscle, marked by a spiderweb of faint, white scars, evidence of bones broken and healed 100 times. He held a bow staff in one hand. He didn't look like All Might. He didn't look like a symbol of peace. He looked like a survivor. He looked like something that had clawed its way out of a grave because it had unfinished business. He took a deep breath of the salty air. 10 months, he whispered. He felt the cold hum of his soul in his chest. He felt the strength in his dead limbs. He wasn't nervous. Anxiety was a physiological response. Cortisol, adrenaline, increased heart rate. Izuku didn't have those anymore. He just had clarity. I'm ready. He picked up his bag. It was filled with bottles of milk. He turned toward the city. Toward UA High. As he walked away from the beach, his shadow stretched long and thin, looking strangely detached from his feet. He passed a mirror in a shop window. He paused. He practiced his smile. It wasn't the wide, reassuring grin of All Might. It was a smaller, sharper smile. A skull joke of a smile. Time to show them, Izuku said to his reflection. Heroes don't die. They just reload. He walked on. His body temperature was 15 degrees Celsius. His pulse was 0. His fear was 0. Izuku Midoriya was cold-blooded. And he was going to be a hero.